Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting guests, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. The title of tonight's show is Revisiting Dean Carlstrom. Sorry about that, looking at the wrong camera. I say revisiting Dean Carlstrom because we have a long-time relationship. He's crewed for me many years ago when we were doing shows together, and he drifted away from TV productions for a while, and now I've got him back on again because there's been a lot that he's learned about himself way before I first met him, not too many years ago. And it's quite a surprise, and it'll unfold for you as we go on the interview now. And I appreciate you coming back and agreeing to bring us up to speed about prehistory from the very beginning of little Dean. Thanks for coming here.
Prehistory. That goes back to the Stone Age, doesn't it?
Well,
Are we going back that far?
Further.
Further. I see. Okay.
How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling a little nervous, but that's okay. I'm used to being in front of the camera, as most of your guests know. I was a part of public access television for several years, 25 years, doing my own productions, being a part of that whole scene.
I didn't know you went back that far in public television. You didn't tell me that all these years. I didn't know you were that far back.
Well, I was living in downtown Portland when public access had begun through cable. They had started the process. Cable came into Portland, and the one good thing that our government did was they decided, because politicians don't know enough about the technical part of things, they established MAC, which is Metropolitan Area Communications Commission.
Yes.
And that was a conglomerate of all of the cities, states, or counties, and metropolitan whatevers of the Tri-County area. And they said to MAC, you represent us. And this is over 25 years
This
ago,
is the
maybe 30.
Portland, Oregon metro area.
Metro area.
Yes, son of a gun.
And they negotiated with the cable company at that time. And one of the things that they did was they established public access television.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, I knew it was going to be free, and you're going to be surprised by this. When I was trained, they had 3 rules. Today they have a book that big, and filled with rules. The 3 rules was no nudity. You can't advertise or show the cost of a product, but you can show the product.
Mm-hmm.
And no swearing.
Uh-huh.
All of which has disappeared, by the way.
Do you miss Jim? Do you miss Jim Spag?
No. Not at all.
He stretched the limits of what was acceptable, right?
He certainly did.
Yeah, for you old timers, somebody you don't want to know about Jim Spag. He was repulsive, if I may, with the stuff he put on, got away with putting on public access television, which made it rather difficult for us. But anyhow, we're getting away from the subject.
Yes,
we're going to talk about you and what you've been up to.
Well, if you really want to get back to that.
All right. So let's start off as though we haven't had an interview before. And you were born when? Do you remember back that far?
No, it is top secret. I always say it's top secret, but it is. If you do not tell anybody.
Okay, I won't tell anybody.
It's October 7th, 1953.
53, and that makes you how old?
Almost 60.
Oh, you're getting up there. And where were you born?
I was born, we'll get into this, but I was born in St. Mary's Hospital, St. Mary's, Pennsylvania.
Okay, we'll go beyond that later on. All right.
Yes.
And trick question, you ready?
No, go ahead.
Why were you born, Dean?
Well, my mother and dad got together and had their little sex, and it came about that I came about, and yeah.
It's sex, I use the word. Okay, that's how you came about. Anything significant about your national or cultural heritage that's worth repeating for the viewers?
Would you repeat that?
Anything significant about your cultural heritage, or are you just plain American white bread?
Well, for many years, I considered myself a second-generation, pure-blood American Swede.
Oh, Carlstrom.
That's exactly
Hello,
right.
Bing.
And then my cousins corrected me. Because they're second-generation, pure-blood American Swede, too. Mm-hmm. They didn't want me to dominate the scene, you see. So I got upped.
So that you are not alone. Yeah.
Yes.
And do you have a religious preference?
I am a Christian. Mm-hmm. As far as within the structure of Christian, I'm currently going to an Assemblies of God church.
Assemblies
However,
of God.
if you look at my background, prior to my graduation of high school, I had a nickname for that experience, and it was a bapraluptist.
A what?
A bapraluptist.
I'm not going to ask you what that means, but tell me anyhow.
I'll do that. Well, the first few years of my life, we were living in Emporium, Pennsylvania, which is the capital of Cameron County. And my parents, both of my parents, were PK kids. Now they're deceased, so I can say they were. My dad was the son of a Methodist minister who came from Sweden.
What's a PK kid?
Pastor's kid.
Oh, okay.
Those are the...
Stop using shorthand for me.
Your
pastor's kid.
I'll try.
Of course, no.
But my mother was Swedish Covenant. And her dad died in 1939 of Hodgkin's disease. So she died. She was without her dad for, what was it? I'm going to roughly say maybe 12, 15 years. Mm-hmm. And she supported her mother and her through nursing in the Cleveland area. And then my dad was conned, I will say, into coming to a picnic in Cleveland where it was that they met, and that was arranged.
Oh, and did either one of them know it was arranged? Or was it behind
No, I don't think so.
So there was a matchmaker working behind the scenes.
The reason for that was that my dad had been pre-married, married before my mom met, and the son that was raised by the three of them was my stepbrother, Don. And my brother, his mother, and Don's grandmother, which was, the mother of his mother, not my granddad or my dad's grandmother, were driving, and they got into an accident, and she died. So he was 2 years old, as I remember, at that particular time. And so he became a single parent for 4 years, dedicated himself totally to Dawn. And when July 4th came around, he told me one time that he would have to take Dawn out of town because the sound of the firecrackers and the hoopla that was surrounding July 4th bothered him so much and reminded him of the sirens that he heard at the time of that accident. It was very upsetting to him. So taking him out of that environment just kind of helped him out.
So the PTSD, before it was identified as PTSD.
For a 2-year-old, yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow. And he was aware of the cause of that anxiety and tension and fear when you heard firecrackers go off.
Yeah, and it would happen around July 4th.
Yeah.
So his dedication to that, he did not go and date anybody, so it was his parents, my grandparents, on my dad's side, that had friends in Cleveland that matchmaked this whole thing and brought my parents together.
Aren't you glad they matchmaked?
Basically, yes. If matchmake is a human trait or a human deal, yeah.
Matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match.
I'll let you sing it. I'm not good at singing.
How about your formal education? You say a few words about that?
I went through 3 years of elementary school in Emporium. Emporium being the Cameron County seat for Cameron County. It's a 4 square mile deal. Then we moved when I was 9.5 years old to California, and I became part of the California scene. And we could talk about an event that happened there just after I moved in.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through, I think it was 10th grade and then half of 11th grade, and we moved up to Medford because my dad had lost his job in autonetics. And he bought a motel in Medford, Oregon, and I became a new arrival at Medford Senior High School, and I graduated Medford in 1972.
Mm-hmm.
Afterwards, I came up here to Portland, and I played around at Goodwill Industries. They sponsored a training program through vocational rehab, and at that particular time, they trained me as an entry-level bookkeeper. When that training was concluded, I was placed in a job with a company called Handicap for Handicap. And I was there for 1.5 years, and then I moved on to other things, which included a different array of types of jobs.
Why were you seen as handicapped?
Why was I seen as handicapped?
Why did they see you, the system see you as handicapped?
I have a weakness in my right side, and we'll talk specifically about why that happened.
Of course.
My right hand, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but my right hand, I don't do anything technical with it, or I don't write with it. I can lift weights with it if it's balanced and under a certain weight. So I can act like everybody else. But if you look at me technically, and if I'm writing, I'm always doing it with the left. If I'm typing, I'm always doing it with the left. When I was a child in the Emporium, and then a little bit in California, I would run and my hand would be up like this. And I would get teased by the kids for doing that. And so I forced my hand to be down like that so I wouldn't get teased. That was maybe in the 6th or 7th grade or something like that.
All this time I've known you, we've never got this deeply into what you're about or how you came about. Yeah, I didn't know.
And it was all because they had sex back in 1953.
You got to blame somebody. Yeah, do you have a mate, a boyfriend, a girlfriend,
No.
a wife, a husband? None of the above.
None of the above. I have had an occasion or two to have somebody interested. and I've turned around and run like the devil from it.
Man, chicken. It ain't over yet, buddy.
Well, you know, you're going to have to trip me up a little bit.
Okay, they've got an eye on you because they've got your email address too on the screen.
Yeah, I can delete it. I can delete it.
How would you characterize your political leanings? Are you left, right, or center, or conservative, or liberal, or what?
Conservative.
Conservative. And how conservative are you?
I would say I'm moderately conservative. But then you could look at it and say you're really conservative. We've had that discussion before.
We've had that one before, yeah. And I'd accept, yeah. You seem to be so objectively reasonable across the board.
No, thank you.
You seem like you're well grounded. I don't hand out the compliments just for nothing.
No, thank you.
But
I'll remember that next time we talk.
When you say moderately conservative, I agree with that.
Well, you have invited me on your show and even allowed the program to continue, aired across wherever channel it goes, and
around the world now, you know.
Well, that's up to you.
It's true.
I think if we're talking to somebody in Afghanistan, we may be they may be thinking different thoughts.
A couple of months ago, one of my shows was seen in Shanghai.
Really?
And there was a professor over there lecturing. He's a China scholar. And one of the students said, I just saw you this morning before I came here. I saw you on television. He says, oh my gosh, we're in China. We've arrived. So they're going to see you in Afghanistan too. Yeah. Now, how about memberships in political, social, or civic organizations? Any memberships that you have worth mentioning for the viewers?
I am a registered, let's see what they call it, a constitutionalist. I left the Republican Party and joined the Constitutional Party. And I did that because I thought that the Republican Party was getting a little too close to what the Democrats were or are, which is on the liberal side. So I'm a constitutionalist.
So the constitutionalists are further right than the Republican Party, generally speaking?
I would look at it and say yes, they are more, they want to follow more of what the traditional Constitution says. And we can talk about that as far as the change.
I'm not sure I want to talk to you about that.
Okay.
No.
So, well, if we've got time or whatever.
Of course. And do you think the present-day Supreme Court is following what the Constitution is about?
No.
Okay.
I go back to 2001 when Bush was debating with, I can't even remember the guy's name.
Neither can I.
But they went before the
Democrat.
Supreme Court
Yeah.
and got a 5-4 vote. And I thought that the decision they did was politically motivated. And,
Of course.
And then you look at certain other decisions that they've made, and from a constitutional viewpoint, they're bringing in other kinds of descriptives, like they're talking about other kinds of legal issues that you know, the World Court from Hague or wherever that is.
Yes, The Hague.
They have also brought in some, in their briefs, when they write out their stories, they bring out these other kinds of things that have no, in my view, no real bearing as far as even being mentioned from the court. But they're there, and they're there for life, or at least until they quit.
I'm tempted to break my trend of thought here with one more question about the Constitution and the Supreme Court. What do you think about the Supreme Court's decision recently about corporations being persons and money is speech? Do you think that was a good decision by the Supreme Court?
I didn't hear about it until just maybe half an hour ago when I was listening to your other program.
Yeah. The Citizens United was the decision, and the the decision was whether corporations can be considered persons. That's an interpretation by some earlier court, and whether corporations or unions can spend all the money they want to with no limitations. And the court ruled that yes, corporations can do that, and it was quite a shocker for a lot of people, including moderate conservatives.
With the training that I have had in bookkeeping and business, I took some classes in high school, and then I took the training I was telling you about earlier. They had talked about corporations, and if you look at it from an entity, you can go against a corporation, and if you're a single person like I am, and you have a business, if you incorporate, you are protecting your private residence and your private entities and your house and your clothing and that kind of thing. But if you're a sole proprietor, they can come and take all of that. So there is some business definition that would kind of agree with that. So, just the fact that they are saying that they're considering it a person would kind of fall into that kind of a definition.
Well, we're going to be together for a while longer, so I'm going to leave that there so we don't get into a big fight before this.
At least 36 more minutes, and then beyond that.
Okay. I asked you about memberships in political, social, or civic organizations.
Aren't you going to turn that page?
All right. How about any persons from the past or alive today that you particularly admire or look up to? Any names come to mind?
I have told you one that I've been impressed with. And you told me that you were in a play once dealing with this one person, and you were on the prosecution side, and her name was Joan of Arc. And you were
the Archbishop.
You were the Archbishop.
Yeah.
And you were very much opposed to that young lady. And I have enjoyed, reading her background and all that goes up with it.
Why
what she did.
Why do you admire Joan of Arc?
Yeah, she was gutsy enough and she was innocent enough, I suppose, and she lacked the education that would have kind of shut down that approach, and she was able to go off and lead an army and do it just because she felt God had said, go do that. I don't know of anybody today that is going to dream a dream in bed, or I don't know if you dream dreams. I dream lots of dreams, but I don't go off and do them in the middle of the day. And then if I get a voice in my head, I kind of question that voice. She didn't seem to question that calling, and I'm sure there was a voice in her head that said, Joan, I want you to go over and meet this guy. And Joan, I want you to go over and do this. And, maybe that was a little schizophrenia from her, but, you're the doctor, I'm not.
I'm not going to go there, baby.
After all, you were the bishop. I'll just leave you at that.
Yeah. Does God ever talk to you?
We talk through his word. Everybody does that. You get certain leanings from that. We're taught in the Christian community that yes, God can give you impressions and thoughts. There have been people who have said that they have heard God's voice. I haven't as yet, but and I'm sure that when I do hear that voice from God, I'm going to be thinking, get thee hence away from me, Satan. But that's just me. And I'm trying to resist touching this because of that microphone.
I think you're a closet humanist and don't even know it yet. No, you are the unique Dean, and I appreciate
Well, thank you.
you're clear about who and what
You
you're
haven't
about.
changed that page yet.
No, you're worried about the page. All right.
Anyway,
Let's see. Can you make me a smile? No, I don't want to laugh. I just want to smile.
now
Okay.
these, I'll tell you right now, the dentist is very proud of this. I've got 13 crowns in my face.
13.
Oh yeah.
You must have cost a few nickels, huh?
Well, must have.
Yeah.
I have continued to tell him every time I see him that I have put one or two of his kids through college at least.
Well, it's close to time for a break in there, and you wanted me to turn the page, so I can't turn the page until we take a break. So shall we take a break, Mr. E, and then we'll come back and talk about CP, cerebral palsy. Okay, we are back, and thank you for staying tuned. And for you first-time viewers who didn't catch the opening of the show, you're watching Conversations with Dr. Don. It's an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as one-of-a-kind individuals. And we'll talk about Dean. We'll revisit him, and we'll talk about his life and what's been going on since I saw him last, and even before that. And we've had a teaser so far. And we've met the other day and talked a little bit more about what we'll talk about tonight. And then you've given me a few more teasing comments, and I'm really eager to get going in this second half of the show. And you want to take over from now and tell me the story you told me about CP.
Okay.
And how your discovery of CP and how long you had it and how it came about and all those kinds of things?
Well, you may want to keep me on track, so we're on cue here. But CP is cerebral palsy, and as I was telling you earlier, I went to a neurologist because what I'm doing is I know that as I'm getting older here, I'm getting a little, not more senile, but I'm getting a little physically handicapped. I had fallen a couple of times walking upstairs, and I got around to looking at and seeing and thinking to myself, well, there may be something to actually pursue a Social Security disability factor.
Sure.
So I have a friend who is now my landlord. She is a disability advocate, and she has known me for over 35 years. And she has even observed the degradation or the disability manifesting itself.
Yes.
So she pursued this, and she and I went to the Social Security office in Beaverton, and we submitted the application. And
Beaverton, that's a suburb of Portland, Oregon.
That's true.
Yes.
And beavers used to live there many years ago.
Stop it.
And now they don't because people have taken over. But we were there.
Ruined the whole atmosphere.
So we made the application, and the process here in Oregon, and I don't know about the rest of the country, but the process is they submit the application through vocational rehab, and they send the application down to Salem, and the state gets involved in evaluating all of that stuff. And in their evaluation, they determined that, after making contact with my general practitioner and having him submit some records and whatnots, that I don't have a case. Well, my general practitioner is a GP, and he has knowledge of all kinds of things. And as you well know, you go into the doctor's office today, and you're only seen once, maybe every 3 or 4 months for a fit like I do. I'm a diabetic, so he has to monitor my insulin and how that all works out. So I see him every 3 months.
How long have you been a diabetic?
Since
Roughly.
1989.
Okay, so please go on.
So he monitors that, but he only sees me probably 10 minutes out of his regular busy day. And that's if we have a chance to talk. So he doesn't necessarily have the rudimentary deal that would necessarily be needed. So my advocate suggested, after looking at that collection that Social Security had as far as documents and stuff, and said, you don't have a case here, Dean. We've got to do something drastic to make these people understand exactly what was happening.
So that if they do the evaluation and you have a case, then you get paid, compensated for your disability.
Hopefully will happen.
Yeah.
That hasn't yet.
Oh, it hasn't yet, okay.
But we are waiting for we went through the first phase, which was that initial application. We got their response. I went to a lawyer at the suggestion of Voc Rehab. They gave me a sheet, and off I went to see them. They are handling the case, and they're over in northeast Portland off of Sandy Boulevard. Mm-hmm. And so they're dealing with that whole thing, and they got the documentation, and on top of that, I was thinking everything was fine. And come to think of it, when my disability advocate and my lawyer got together and we were all at a conference, I found out that the lawyer was going to recommend, because of the lack of evidence again, that we withdraw my application. So my advocate knew her business, and she knew doctors and stuff, and she said, you go to this doctor in Hillsborough and this doctor in Hillsborough. And she was talking about a neurologist and an orthopedist. And we'll see what they say. And then we're going to go. I have an appointment in June to go to a neuropsychologist. So all of those people combined will make a much more bigger statement about my condition.
Of course.
But when I went to the neurologist, he hadn't seen me. We'd never met. He's a lot handsomer than you are, by the way.
Oh, stop it.
But when he was sitting down, for some reason, I felt, I guess you would say, compelled to talk about my birth. And I told him this little story. Now, for the record and for everybody, this is how I was born. In 1953, my mother had been in the hospital with me for 2 weeks prior to my birth with pneumonia.
Pneumonia?
And then I decided to come into the world. And she still had pneumonia. But I was rather insistent on coming into the world.
We know.
Yes. So they tried, and I don't know exactly how many quote unquote hours they tried natural birth, but they did notice that she was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So they did two things at this particular point. They moved her from wherever it was she was in a natural birth area, wherever they do that, and they moved her into surgery to have a C-section.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also, at that same time, came out and talked to my dad and told him they did not, meaning they being the doctors, did not expect either one of us to live.
Oh, man.
So what my dad did was, because at that particular time, my mother's mother, you heard that she was taking care of her mother in Cleveland before they met.
Mm-hmm.
My parents took her mother, and she was living with us in Emporium, Pennsylvania. And she died in that house that we were living at when I was but 2 years old. And that was really a tribute to my mother as far as taking care of her mother. And there's a story I'll tell you after this little thing. But my dad called my mother's brother, my uncle, in Cleveland, and said to him, Dorothy, my mother, and me, at that particular time, they didn't know whether I was male or female. The possibility is that they are not going to live much longer. Can you get down here?
Mm-hmm.
Because the thought was that my dad did not want to face my mother's mother alone. So Ernie, my uncle, was trucking down from Cleveland to St. Mary's Hospital. And at that time, they were having a C-section in surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Now, during that process, you know there's a soft tissue right up here on the skull for all babies.
Yes.
When they cut into my mother, they cut me right up here. Now, I don't know how deep they went or any of that kind of stuff, but they cut.
They were a little careless, huh?
Well, if you look at C-sections in 1953, I've been told that C-sections were relatively new at that particular time. And because I had pneumonia, they wanted to get me out fast and put me into another relatively new device known as an incubator.
They knew that you had pneumonia too.
Yes, they did.
Oh my gosh.
Well, we're getting the same blood and the whole thing.
Of course.
So I had pneumonia, mother had pneumonia, and they put me in an incubator right from that. And then they did something that compounded that whole thing, and it's not done today. They gave me 100% pure, unadulterated oxygen.
They didn't know then what they know now.
That's right. So all of that combined, I told this doctor. Now, why I did that, it was right there.
But you had gotten these stories yourself.
I had talked to my parents over conversations about it for maybe 5 or 6 or 7 different conversations.
Sure.
This is all coming together. And what he basically told me is that, Mr. Carlstrom, this is a doctor that was in Hillsborough now. He said, you have a classic textbook cerebral palsy situation. And I looked at him and I said, cerebral who? And he repeated himself. That is the first time in my 59 plus years of talking to doctors that anybody has even come close to telling me exactly what I had, which is cerebral palsy.
And you've seen it manifested all of your life in various little ways.
Various little ways, yes. There have been questions that I have had in my head that, you know, I have known my right side is weaker than my left side. I have known that I don't have coordination with my right hand that I do with my left. And there are other things that I have gone through that I have had questions floating up there in the stratosphere for 60 years that basically kind of went, maybe as my faith would have it, maybe I should talk to God when I get up there, and we'll kind of clarify all this.
Sure.
So we'll have a nice discussion, God and me, when we get there. And so with that in mind, that was the first time somebody said something like that. So.
And how long ago did you hear that? The first time somebody said this?
Within 2 months ago.
Oh my gosh.
Now, if you look at the history, you don't go to neurologists all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You go to CPs, or GPs, I'm sorry.
GPs, yes.
And you have your problem taken care of, or they refer you to other people to deal with certain things. You know, like I've had 5 surgeries within the last, I'll say 12 years. 3 of those surgeries were for a condition called a fistula.
Uh-huh.
That was something that was referred to another doctor.
Yes.
And his name happens to be, I won't say because he may be listening, but he was a nice guy, and his name was rather interesting. But he did a wonderful job.
Mm-hmm.
Fixed that whole problem up, and then I had brain surgery because I had an acoustic neuroma tumor. But
what kind of tumor?
It's called an acoustic neuroma tumor.
On the hearing nerve?
On the left side.
Uh-huh.
And they determined that my left ear had not been hearing anything when they discovered it in 2005. And it hadn't been operating or hearing since before probably 2000, because it's a slow growing tumor.
Mm-hmm.
And it grows out of the canal. The acoustic neuroma tumor grows out of the canal where the nerve from whichever side it happens to be, and mine was on the left, and grows into your brain, crushing the nerve and crushing the balance, because your balance goes with
along with the inner ear.
with it. So it all got crushed. And I was told by a neurosurgeon, a Dr. O'Malley, who's a wonderful guy. I call him pit bull of surgeons. And he told me once that he noticed that I wasn't all that keen about having a brain tumor surgery. And he told me, Dean, he told me in a letter, he said, Dean, you will be acting with the acoustic neuroma tumor as though you were drunk. Those were his words.
Mm-hmm.
Within the end of the year, if you do not do something about that tumor. But you won't have any alcohol at all. It'll be just that tumor. And with that, I came in to his office on October 31st, which was Halloween, wearing, and you ready for this? I had hunted for this for a couple of days. I had an arrow come right here and right out there. And I walked into his office on October 31st wearing that. And he said, that's a wonderful outfit, Mr.
Did
Carlstrom.
you see the psychiatrist at that time? You were overdue.
Yeah, it was overdue, yeah. So we had surgery The first surgery for that acoustic neuroma tumor was Thanksgiving week that same year.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second surgery was in June because they had only were able to take out 90% of the tumor,
Mm-hmm.
which was the size of a small grape.
Mm-hmm.
It looked, on the x-ray, it looked like a little tadpole because it had grown out from that canal
Mm-hmm.
and went into the brain.
It's marvelous what surgery is nowadays.
Yeah.
So the second surgery was successful, of course.
That's what it's been determined that that has been the case, yes. All of the tumor apparently is gone. The evidence that the neurosurgeon had seen was, my guess, was just tissue that had surrounded that tumor, had been irritated so that, it just kind of inflamed a little bit. And now it's had some years to calm down and go back to normal, and there's no evidence there's anything there. Knock on wood.
Yeah. So that's your medical history until this time.
Oh, I've had all kinds of other history medically too,
Yeah.
but we don't have time for that.
So,
Excuse me.
sure. Are you aware of any psychological realizations or impact on your life since this discovery of CP?
In 2 months' time, no.
Yeah.
Although those questions,
Lingering in the background, of course, yeah.
now, the next step that we're going to be taking with that in mind is that I will be going to a neuropsychologist, and we'll be spending 5 hours or 6 hours with him. And the purpose of that is to be tested for cognitive functions, memory functions, and several other different things.
That's a long time for that testing.
Well, I'll be able to tell you what he did in short order, but I've heard that one of those things is where we will be discussing for 60 minutes what we're talking about today in greater detail. So I'm practicing on you, Doc. But he's going to take all of that information and write a report within 3 weeks after our doing that in June. And what I have heard is that during the stress of birth, because cerebral palsy only happens, and I've looked at this on the internet, cerebral palsy takes place just before, during, or just after birth. And could manifest itself within 2 years. But after that, cerebral palsy is already there. So there's a website, there it is right now. If you have a question about cerebral palsy, that's the United Cerebral Palsy website and their phone number that you can contact. Or you can go on, for your guest's sake, the website on the internet and check it out yourself. But don't go running to neurologists in the next 5 weeks or so unless you really think you've got something similar.
So what's your life like today?
Well, right at the moment, I was released from my driving responsibilities back. I was a delivery driver up until May of 2011. I had been placed on unemployment because they let me go. And that's a different story in and of itself. There was a contract dispute, and the contract they wanted to have for all of the drivers, in my view, had 9 different problems to it, and I was advised by a lawyer friend not to sign it because that lawyer friend found those same 9, and then he found 2 other problems that only lawyers would find. So
they let you go.
they let me go. And I haven't been employed since, unless you look at the business that I have tried to begin with a company called ACN. And it's a fine company. They do network marketing stuff, and they do telecommunication services for public.
And if anybody wants to learn more about that, they can email you, because your email address will be up on the screen.
Yeah.
So we avoid conflict of interest here by commercials on public access, which you
That's
know
still a
about
rule.
with a big, thick rule book.
Which they've defined, I suppose, in greater detail.
What's a typical day for you?
Well, I'm waking up a little later than I would if I had a job. And where I'm living, there is all kinds of yard work as opposed to where I used to live. So there's all kinds of exercise possibilities. And I am trying not to fall. I did fall at the house once, which really upset my friend. And she is very cognitive of my problems, so we're looking at that and making sure that things are gelling.
Yeah.
So,
You sleep good?
on occasion, but I do wake up occasionally at 3 or 4 in the morning, like I did this morning when I looked up the cerebral palsy website. And you? Do you sleep well?
Generally
Or
speaking.
should I talk to Pat?
Pat's my wife.
Yeah.
Leave Pat out of it, because she has some things to say about you. I don't want to say them in public. No. She
I
likes
saw her the other day. I know what she said.
So the other day.
Okay.
Yeah. And so life is pretty standard and normal. And I guess, I'm not sure you're hanging on, but you're just waiting to find out what all of these top level professionals are going to say in their assessment of what's going on with you. And hopefully the outcome will be that you will be stable and be going along with your life in subsequent years with no serious deterioration of your ability to function, and have an opinion that lets you get more money to feed yourself better.
Well, the orthopedist that I saw, which is the other guy that I saw, he took an X-ray of my pelvic area, of course, to check out things, since he was looking at a cerebral palsy problem as well. And he had me walking down the hallway, but the X-ray showed him 3 different problems. First of all, I have a disc right at the very base of my spine that has popped out of place.
Ooh.
And then there's 2 hip bones, the joints of the hips. I'll be looking at within the next 15 years of trading out both of those and making it match with metal replacements.
You are falling apart.
I am falling apart.
The
Don.
bionic Dean Carlstrom.
And I'm 60 years to your 84, and you're going in for knee surgery.
Yeah, in another 8 or 9 days. Yeah, won't be long now.
Do you have any other metal that the metal detectors as you're going through the airport will discover?
Knock wood, bend over.
Right
No,
there, guy.
no. Well, I'm aware the time is running down. So why don't you look over at camera 3 or 2 or 1, I will let you know in a second, and tell the viewers about anything you want to say to them based on what you've told me and what's happened here in our interview, what would be useful for them in their lives if they discover they've got something that is as important as what's been happening with you and your discovery that you've had cerebral palsy all of your life.
Well, one thing that I'm learning is that I need to speak up. And I would suggest when you see your own physician that you take the time to bring him up to date with all of your past history so that you might actually be diagnosed if you fit that particular bill for cerebral palsy. Or maybe there is some other problem that he may recognize because you've taken the time to talk to him.
All right, we're going to have to stop now because my director's going to yell at me again. It's time to close up, so let's do some public service announcements, Mr. E, so we can say goodnight. And there's the broadcast schedule for you viewers in Washington County when you can watch the shows. And to get my shows on the web, Google Don Baham YouTube, and there's a whole bunch of shows up there that you can watch at your leisure. And to learn more about the American Civil Liberties Union, we need the ACLU because our civil liberties are in jeopardy nowadays with this administration now, and the ACLU protects our civil liberties. Join the ACLU. And to get my shows regularly, broadcast regularly by your local public access station where you're watching in this country, go to www.pegmedia.org and learn how to do that. And we got to end corporate personhood because the Supreme Court has said that corporations are persons, hello, and that money is speech. And we've got to have a new amendment to the Constitution, Amendment 28, that says corporations are not persons and money is not speech.
We'll talk about that later.
Thanks for watching this episode of Conversations with Dr. Don. And my thought for the day is, again, the same old thought, that same old good thought, KFC, and not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable. To you, too. And to you, Dangerous. And to you, Norm. And